Hey everyone, welcome to Order of Operations. Before we get into our example problems, let's first take a look at what the order of operations actually are and explain a little bit more about the different parts. So, order of operations is often described as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally or maybe even PEMDAS. A lot of times people believe that is actually 6 separate steps, but in reality it's only 4. So let's take a look at each of these 4 steps. The first step is parentheses, which we know can be parentheses. It can be that grouping symbol. But it also extends out to brackets and braces. And the reason it extends out is because any grouping symbol can be considered a parentheses for our examples today, but also in the event that we need to use multiple grouping symbols together, it's easier to draw them differently so that we can tell the difference between the different symbols. So just in the event that we have a bracket and then inside the brackets are a couple groups of parentheses, we can tell those easier apart by them being different symbols. So for today's purposes, just know that if you ever see a parentheses, a bracket, or a brace, they're all considered parentheses. The second step is exponents. Now, an exponent can happen outside a set of parentheses, or it can happen just behind a number, but we don't do anything with exponents until we've taken care of everything inside of a set of parentheses. Step number 3 is multiplication and division. We get a lot of issues when we see multiplication and division in math problems, especially dealing with order of operations. These are grouped together because you can actually do division before multiplication. And the reason why is because these are grouped together, and you can do either operation before the other one as long as you are working left to right across the problem. So if multiplication comes first, do multiplication. If division comes first, do division. It doesn't matter what order you do it, as long as you're taking care of all the multiplication and division together, and as long as you're working from the left-hand side of the problem all the way to the right. Then we finally get to our last step, which is addition and subtraction. That follows the same rules as above, where we start on the left-hand side of the problem, we work our way towards the right-hand side of the problem, and we solve either addition or subtraction, whatever comes first, working left to right. All right, so let's use that and get into some of our examples here. We'll start with a couple beginner level problems. We'll zoom in really quick and take a look. So our first type of problem that we have is 7 plus 72 divided by 9. When using our order of operations, we see that we can start at the top, right? We can just look at parentheses. Do we have parentheses? No, we don't. Do we have exponents? No, we don't. Then we get to our third step, which is multiplication and division. We look, yes, we do have division, and we have it right here. So we solve that part of the problem. 72 divided by 9 is 8. That leaves me with 7 plus 8. Now that I've simplified one step, I'm only down to one operation, and 7 plus 8 is 15. Now, moving on to example 2, we can see that this problem is a little longer. It's a little more involved. And a lot of times people see these type of problems and they kind of freak themselves out because it's so much. They try to solve everything at once. Whenever you have a long math problem, the best advice I can give is just follow the order of operations, go one step at a time, rewrite the problem, solve the next thing, rewrite the problem, and eventually you'll work your way to an answer. You don't need to freak out over having everything or trying to do everything all at once. So, when looking at this problem, we go through our order of operations. The first thing in order of operations is our parentheses. Do we have parentheses? Yes, we do. So we solve what's inside the parentheses. That ends up being 5 minus 3, which simplifies to 2. And then now all we have to do is just rewrite the rest of the problem. So that's 40 divided by 4 minus 2. From here, we need to take a look at what we have and what our order of operations are. Well, we've already solved the parentheses. We check for exponents. We don't have any. Then we move on to multiplication and division. Do I have multiplication and division? Yes, I do. It's right here. So now that I have noticed my multiplication and division, I have 40 divided by 4, which is 10. Rewrite the rest of the problem. That gets me down to one simple operation, 10 minus 2, which is 8. And so again, even though the problem's a little longer, by following order of operations, I'm able to solve it. Okay, so now from the beginner level, let's move on to some intermediate level problems. So these problems are a little more involved, have a little more to them, and we'll see what happens. So problem number 1 says 8 times 5 minus 4, in parentheses, minus 3. All of that is divided by 2 squared plus 1 times, in parentheses, 3 minus 2, that whole quantity squared. Whew. Okay, so that's a lot. Now, the first thing that I will tell you, and I'm going to draw this in pink so you guys can see this, it's never explicitly told, especially in books that I've seen, that anytime you have division, and the division's written like a fraction like we have in problem number 1 here, that the entire numerator and the entire denominator are basically inside a set of parentheses. I see a lot of common mistakes by people, looking at this problem and trying to divide 8 and 2 and then doing some weird simplifications like from the top to the bottom or from the numerator to the denominator. But really, our goal here is to simplify all of the numerator, then all of the denominator. So let's take a look at how that works. We're going to focus in right now just on the numerator. All right, so the numerator ends up being 8 times, in parentheses, 5 minus 4 minus 3. So our numerator, and I'm going to write all of our numerator parts in blue. So we start with our parentheses, right, because that's the first step of order of operations. So 5 minus 4. That's going to be 1, right? And now we have 8 times 1 minus 3. The next step in order of operations for us is multiplication and division, which ends up being 8 times 1, which is just 8. Oops, let me write that in the pen. 8 and minus 3. And then we simplify 8 minus 3 to be 5. So now we have simplified our numerator by using order of operations. Let's come back, and this time we're going to solve our denominator. The denominator we're going to take a look at. I'm going to highlight the denominator in light green. We're just going to keep with the green theme on our denominator. So the first step in order of operations, again, for our denominator is parentheses. So we take care of what's inside the parentheses. 3 minus 2 is 1, and 1 is how that simplifies. Then we rewrite everything. So 1 is squared, right? We have 2 squared plus 1 times 1. So step number 2 for us in our order of operations is taking care of the 2 squared and the 1 squared. That's okay. We have multiple exponents. We can simplify multiple exponents together. So 2 squared, we know 2 squared is 4, and 1 squared is 1. So now we have 4 plus 1 times 1. From here, our next step is multiplication. So that's going to end up giving us 1 times 1, which is 1, So our denominator now is simplified to 4 plus 1. And writing that all out, I'll write it in black and simplify. Numerator was 5. 4 plus 1 is 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So, I understand that that's a lot. That is a complicated problem. But if we can understand that basically what's happened here is that they've hid two separate order of operations problems together, and at the end we just have to divide them, it makes the problem a little easier. And if we follow the order of operations all throughout the numerator and do it again all throughout the denominator, we'll be fine. All right, so now let's look at our problem number 2 here. Problem number 2 is 10 divided by 5 times 3 plus 1. Now, a lot of times people want to jump right into this problem. A problem like this was made famous by the Sacramento Kings of the NBA a couple years ago, and it caused a lot of debate. And sometimes you see it pop up on Facebook or some social media from time to time, but let's tackle it. We have 10 divided by 5 times 3 plus 1. So, our first step we know is parentheses. We've got to take care of that parentheses. Solving that, that gives us 3 plus 1 is 4, and we have 5 times 4, and then before that we have 10 divided by 5. So our whole second step is 10 divided by 5 times 4. But remember, when we solve multiplication and division, we have to solve from left to right. So solving that from left to right makes my first step 10 divided by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Rewrite it, everything gives me 2 times 4. And then solving the very last step, 2 times 4 is 8. So, where a lot of people want to just distribute the 5 or do things with the 5 first, you can't do that. You've got to go with the order of operations, and if you follow that in a consistent way, everything's going to be fine. And now we're on to our last 2 problems, which are some more advanced kind of problems. So these are longer. These are those problems I said that give people headaches or maybe some anxiety because everything's happening together. Well, let's just take a look. Right? So in this problem, this first example, we have negative 10 divided by 20 divided by 2 squared times 5 divided by 5 in the parentheses times 8 minus 2. So when we start where we always start, which is parentheses. We're going to take a look here, and everything inside of our parentheses is where our focus has to be. Even though there's a lot of other things happening in the problem, we have to just focus on this mini problem inside of our larger problem. So, with that, we're looking at 20 divided by 2 squared times 5 divided by 5. Well, our first step after parentheses is exponents. Exponents I'm going to highlight in green. That's where we have to start. So, we know that 2 squared is 4, and we can rewrite everything else. Just for our purposes, I'm only going to rewrite the stuff that's inside the parentheses just to kind of help us out. Now we're still simplifying that. That gives me 20 divided by 4 times 5 divided by 5. So, lots of craziness going on, but remember, it's all just multiplication and division. That's in one step, and we work that step going left to right. So, solving left to right, that means my first step has to be 20 divided by 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. I rewrite the rest. Times 5 divided by 5. Still working from left to right. 5 times 5 is 25. And now we're down to 25 divided by 5. Divided by 5. And 25 divided by 5 is 5. So now we've been able to follow our order of operations and our rules from working left to right with multiplication and division to simplify that whole parenthesis just to the number 5. From here, we can rewrite the rest of the problem that we've kind of neglected. So we have negative 10 divided by 5 times 8 minus 2. Now that's a lot more straightforward of a problem. So we look at our operations. We have division, multiplication, subtraction. That means we have to do any of the multiplication and division before we do the subtraction. Step 3 before step 4. Our first step, working from left to right, is negative 10 divided by 5. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. We rewrite the rest. Moving on to this step, we have negative 2 times 8 minus 2. We got to do the multiplication before we do subtraction. So negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. And now we have negative 16 minus 2, which is negative 18. And we're done. So where the problem started out as a lot and having a lot of things embedded inside other things, if we just take our time, do one step at a time, do what the problem gives us or take what the problem gives us, we can get to the right answer. It's not as bad as we make it out to be in our heads. Okay, the last problem, more of a doozy. We have a lot of grouping symbols in this one. We have brackets, braces, negative 4 squared plus negative 10, close the brace, times negative 4, close the bracket, minus negative 5 plus negative 10. I just want to point out one thing just with the way that this problem is written beforehand that does sometimes confuse people. And I'm going to highlight this in like a peach color. The reason that this negative 4, negative 10, negative 5, negative 10, a lot of times you'll see books write problems this way just to kind of close off or draw attention to a negative. You know, leaving out negatives is a huge problem in a lot of people's math careers. And I would say that sometimes books do these extra parentheses just to draw your eye to the negative number. It doesn't mean you have to do anything extra or calculate something. There's no hidden trick or twist or, you know, secret information. It's really just, hey, make sure you know this is a negative number. All right, so I'm going to take those off and we'll get into solving the problem. Okay, so we know we have our big grouping symbol here. That's where our eye is drawn, right? And then inside of that, we have another grouping symbol. And so our eye has to be at this inner piece that is negative 4 squared plus negative 10. So to solve this, right, we're inside of our parentheses. We move on to exponents. So negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. And then we have 16 plus negative 10, right? That is the same thing as just saying 16 minus 10, which is 6. So we've solved the inner parenthesis of negative 4 squared plus negative 10. We've simplified that down to 6. And now we know in our bracket we should have 6 times negative 4. And we just rewrite everything else. Minus negative 5 plus negative 10. All right, so now, again, when we are trying to solve these problems, we do still have a parenthesis or a grouping symbol. Right here, it's highlighted for you. 6 times negative 4. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. And now we rewrite the rest of the problem. Negative 24 minus negative 5 plus negative 10. I just took the grouping symbols out kind of to make things easier. All right. Here's something new that we haven't talked about today, but we might remember. We have two negatives next to each other. Remember the rule. Two negatives end up making a positive. That simplifies that. We have plus and minus. When we have plus and minus together, we end up with just a minus sign. So the easiest way to write all of that and simplify those double signs is negative 24 plus 5 minus 10. And again, since that's just addition and subtraction, we're working our way left to right here. So our first step is negative 4 plus 25, or negative 4 plus 5. I'm sorry. Negative 4 plus 5 is negative 19. And we have negative 19 minus 10, which ends up being negative 29. Okay. So, again, order of operations. It can really save your life when you're trying to do a bunch of complicated problems, especially when you're faced with a lot of things happening at the same time. Maybe it's division with numerators and denominators. Maybe it's grouping symbols inside grouping symbols. Or maybe it's just multiple things that you have to watch and look out for. As long as we go in order, you'll be fine. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Look forward to seeing you next time. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can catch us on all of our social medias at Doesn't Add Up Math Tutoring. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Catch you later, guys.